Last week, I had a patient that came in and complained about her immune system being completely depleted. She said, I'm sick all the time. It takes me forever to recover, like 2 to 3 weeks. Can you help me boost my immune system? And once we started doing all the inquiry and asking questions, I realized really quickly that her diet was subpar. She is not eating nutrients that are boosting her immune system. She's not sleeping enough because she goes to bed at 1 a.m. after she watches Netflix and her phone for hours just to relax, according to her, and wakes up at 5:30 or 6 a.m., which doesn't give her enough hours of sleep. So today we're going to talk about the 5-element theory according to Chinese medicine. And what I love about this theory is when people come in and say, my immune system is depleted, for example, we need to look for the root cause and what other systems are affected and which one started it all, so we can treat and address all of them in order to help the patient reach homeostasis. Welcome back to my channel. If it's your first time here, I'm Clara and I create Chinese medicine and acupuncture contents for students and practitioners, making it easy to grasp and fun to learn. And we're going to talk about the 5-element theory. Like I said, it's my favorite theory in Chinese medicine. I love to teach this lecture because I resonate with it and because it's so useful in clinical practice. And stay till the end because I'm going to talk about one of the sequence of the 5-element that often is forgotten, not taught in school, or not elaborated enough. And I think that's probably the sequence that is the most applicable in clinical practice. So that's one of my favorites. And we're going to talk about it right after the regular one. What I love about the 5-element theory is easy to explain to patients as well and to let them know why they're having this problem, what is the root cause, and how it all really mesh or match together. So I always say, we are not a separate being. Western medicine, conventional medicine has a tendency to teach systems, right? The central nervous system, the digestive system. Let's say we talk about, the musculoskeletal system, and they see them as entities, and they are entities, but they are entities as a whole, and they should all really be connected because we are connected. They all depend on each other. Well, the 5-element theory starts by looking at nature specifically and addressing the fact that if we are in nature looking at how nature balances itself, how all the environment help each other, balance each other, right? It's fascinating as how that happens. So in the body, it's the same thing. Every system depend on the other and balance each other. That's why I love the 5-element theory. If you guys have any questions, go and put them in the chat at any time. I will try my best to answer them in the time that I can or the frame that I can. If I see them, because of course I'm trying to pay attention to 10 things at the same time. So let's start it up by talking about the 5 elements themselves, right? And the 5 elements in nature are wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. So I want to preface this by saying that even though we say metal, I believe in my mind the translation should be or supposed to be minerals, okay? Mineral. Because I think metal makes us think of a piece of metal, but doesn't make us think of, for example, rock formation, of magnesium, of iron, lead, aluminum. So think of metal more as mineral because that's how it's represented, even though it's translated as metal. Okay, so loss of translation in Chinese happens a lot, and I like to look at it from a different perspective because it makes it easier to understand how this whole 5-element works in nature and also works within our body. Make sense? All the other ones make sense, right? So in general, if we start with the generating sequence, which means each elements are part of a wheel, and that wheel or a cog in the wheel, and that wheel is functioning perfectly when every cog in the wheel is really connected to the next and the next, and everything flows properly. When one cog in the wheel is out of whack, it is going to make all the other one out of balance. That is the basis of the 5-element theory. So wood generates fire. We understand that in order to make, if you go camping, if you've ever been camping, we need wood to make a fire, right? That makes sense. Fire or heat generate earth, which means when there's sunshine, we grow vegetables, we grow fruit, right? This is why in Florida, they grow beautiful fruit like oranges, right? If you are living in a place where there's not a lot of sun at all, like in the northern areas, like in Alaska, they have to import a lot of the fruits and vegetables because they can't grow a lot because there's not enough heat. There may be sun, but there's not enough heat, right? We need heat to grow the earth. The earth needs the sunshine and the heat in order to grow. It's all about balance. And then earth generates metal or generates mineral, right? In a good soil in the earth, there's a lot of minerals that come out, right? We have a lot of minerals that comes from the earth. And so if the earth is really strong and beautiful and has all the great, perfect environment, it is going to have a lot of soil that's full of mineral, right? Rich in mineral. Make sense? So mineral or metal generates water. And basically, it enriches the water, because water is made of minerals, right? There's magnesium, there's sulfur, there's potassium, depending on each water, or depending which place the water is from. The seawater is the same, right? It's got salt in it. So all those are part of minerals. Make sense? Okay, and then of course water generates wood in order to grow trees, to grow plants, to grow the forest. And green, like Vancouver is very green because we get lots of rain. So when it rains a lot in Vancouver, we get beautiful green trees, right? So water helps grow wood. This is a whole balance within the ecosystem of nature. And what we look at in TCM perspectives, if we transpose this 5 elements nature balance into the body. So when I explain the 5 elements, I like to give it systems for each element so students understand or patients understand how it all connects. So let me look at this in that perspective. Okay, let's change there. Okay, so when we look at the wood element, which corresponds to liver, gallbladder, it is, for me, in my perspective, I like to look at this as the central nervous system, because liver and gallbladder gets affected by stress. Stress creates a lot of issue with the central nervous system. It's a fight or flight. We're constantly fighting stress. So it affects our muscle. We get all tense. We clench our jaw. We have tension, headache, and there's a lot of tension in the body. So I like to associate the word or liver gallbladder with the central nervous system for the example that we're going to look at in perspective of clinical practice. When we look at the fire element, which corresponds to the heart and small intestine, I like to look at this as the mind, right? Because the heart in TCM is in charge of the Shen, the spirit, the mind as a whole. And so it's really looking at fire element as the mind, right? The sleep. In order for us to sleep better, we need a calm mind, right? So that's how I look at it. And then earth, of course, is the spleen and stomach, which relates to the digestive system in TCM. Even though we say spleen and stomach, it's not just the spleen and the stomach, of course, meridian, energetic. It's the whole digestive system from the start of it within the mouth to the end of it within the anal area, right? This is the whole digestive system, and that's earth. The next one, which is metal or mineral, like I like to call it, is corresponding to lung and large intestine, which I refer to as the immune system, because the lung gets affected a lot by viruses and bacteria that can enter the body within the skin or within the nasal area, for example, or within the mouth. But it affects our breathing ability and it affects our immune system. And the large intestine has the good bacteria, the good flora within our gut, which is probiotics, right? Which is our defense system. So again, this is the immune system as a whole. That's what I look at when I look at the metal element. And the water element is kidney and bladder or urinary bladder. So kidney and urinary bladder are corresponding to the water element. And I like to look at this as 2 entities. One, the aging system, because it's our essence, it's the root of who we are. It's our aging system, the water system. And it's also our reproductive system, which kind of connects to the aging, right? Because our reproductive system happens as we grow, and eventually, specifically for women, as we age, we are not able to reproduce anymore. So the aging system and the growth reproductive system, I think, is one within the water. but it's a really good way to look at it to see how everything is connected. Make sense? If someone comes in and has a lot of stress, which who doesn't have stress nowadays? Everybody has stress. If we are very stressed, what's going to happen is we may be able to fall asleep because we're tired at the end of the day, but then we wake up. And as you guys know, when we wake up between 1 and 3 a.m., this is liver time, right? And liver gets affected by stress. This is why I like to look at the wood element as the central nervous system. So I have a lot of patients that come and they wake up and they say, oh, I always wake up during the night. What time? And before they tell me what time, I'll say between 1 and 3, and they go, how do you know? Because I can see that they're stressed. I can see that their liver is being affected, the TCM liver, right? The Chinese medicine liver, which is not just your entity or your liver. So when I see someone that's really stressed and wakes up between 1 and 3 a.m., and for example, sometimes they cannot go back to sleep or they toss and turn the rest of the few hours they have to sleep, that affects the sleep. So wood generates fire in this instance when we are a lot of stress. Now we have a bigger fire, meaning we can't sleep. It affects our mind, right? And so we need wood to get a fire when we go camping. However, if there's too much wood, that might make the fire bigger and bigger and bigger, and then suddenly we can't contain the fire and we have a problem, right? So this is the same idea. The more stressed we are, the less we can sleep. And so that's affected. And then the fire element generates earth, or the brain is going to be connected to the next one, which is the digestive system. Now, the digestive system gets affected if you don't sleep enough. You're going to crave coffee to try to stay awake. You're going to crave sugar to try to get your mind going at work because your mind is just starting to go foggy and there's no more energy, right? So we're going to start eating or drinking food and ingesting food that is not going to give us good nutrients, right? So that's going to create some out of balance issue, and we're going to be fatigued, which spleen gets affected by energy being low. So we're going to have no energy because we didn't sleep. That's just normal common sense. Then what happens is when we don't sleep and we're looking for coffee and we're tired and we're looking for sugar, we're starting to eat a diet that is not rich in nutrients to feed the immune system, to feed the antibodies, to feed the probiotics in the gut. And so now we get sick all the time and the immune system gets depleted. Just like I talked about when we first started today about the person that immune system was depleted. It was coming from the fact that she wasn't feeding her immune system good food and she wasn't sleeping enough, right? So we went back twice. We went back to the digestive system and to the heart fire system, or brain-mind system. So the three that were affected for her was her immune system. That's why she came for, but she needs to change her diet. And she needs to make an effort to go to sleep earlier than she was going to, because otherwise I can do all the acupuncture in the world. It is not going to help the body rebalance if the lifestyle is not changed, right? So when we treat patients, it's always a teamwork. We do the work, they do the work, right? We work together. I always say to patients, I'm going to help you reach homeostasis or manage the disease or, try to get back in balance. And that's at the top of the mountain. I'm going to show you the way to the top. I'm going to show you which way we're going to go. I'm going to guide you up there. But you need to walk. I can't do it by myself, right? We are this as a team. And that's very important to explain to patients because otherwise they expect you to do all the work and them to come home and, have burgers and sleep 3 hours a night and think it's just going to repair itself, which is not the case, as we all know. Okay? And then if that continues and the immune system is depleted, and we don't sleep well, and we are stressed for a long period of time. I'm not talking about a week, but a long period of time. And we don't have a good diet, and the immune system is depleted. Well, our aging system is going to get affected. We're going to age much faster. And actually, more and more fertility issue comes from the fact that the patients have a poor diet, poor immune system, poor sleep, and a lot of stress. This is a really big cause of unknown infertility. Unknown meaning there's not structurally something wrong, but it's a lifestyle that is not properly addressed, right? Makes sense? So when we look at the controlling sequence within the body, we always want to try to figure out where it all started, right? Often, I think the most that I see in clinical practice is people that are stressed and it affects their sleep. Obviously, that's a very big one. People that don't have a good diet and have a response of immune system that's very depleted, right? So those are going to be what we look for. And if you do look at the 5-element theory, this is also the generating sequence, the time to use the 5 Shu transporting points to address this. If there's a mother-son relationship, right? So for example, in the generating sequence, the earth is the mother of metal, right? Because it generates metal, it makes a baby stronger kind of thing. So earth is the mother of metal, metal is the son of mother. So when we use the 5 Shu transporting points, which are all located below the elbow and below the knees, that's why we always needle people way more on the limbs in general. Specifically, if you use a 5 Shu transporting point, you can use the points that are going to be the mother-son relationships of the point within the same meridian or with the meridian of the son and the mother. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, because I know that's a really complicated lecture for my students and they get always like, what? I do have a video on the Shu transporting point that explains exactly how to use it with the 5 element, because I think that's a lecture on itself, but it's looking at the Shu stream, or the earth point for spleen is spleen 3, for example. So we would have to use spleen 3 because we want to tonify and make sure the mother is strong in order to generate the metal or the baby. And what's cool about this is spleen 3 is also in charge of helping the digestive system or spleen function in transporting and transforming nutrients. So it's perfect for this example where we want to make sure the digestive system is strong in absorbing nutrients in order to give the metal or the sun the boost it needs for the immune system. Make sense? Okay. Silva said, if you say liver 1, 2, 3, which time counts? Here in Germany now, it's after 9 p.m. Which clock counts for the organ? Where you're living. So if it's wherever your environment, you have to remember that the entity is always you and your environment and your DNA. Everything is an entity. So for me right now, it's noon. I'm supposed to relax my heart. It's heart time. I'm supposed to not have stimulants, relax, enjoy, right? I'm enjoying, I'm relaxing, I'm with you guys, right? So it's where you are at, where your environment is. We always adapt to the environment. Now, hope that answered your question. Nuala said, universally 1, 3 a.m. where you usually live. She answered for me. Awesome. Thank you. Annalisa, the Shu transporting point video is amazing. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you liked it. You can just go to my channel or I'll post it here for the replay. Good? Okay, so that's for the generating sequence that can get out of balance. The next sequence is the one that we use a lot in clinical practice as well, which is the controlling sequence. So there's 2 ways to look at the controlling sequence, in a way that controlling as in making sure everything is in balance, and out of control when it gets out of balance, right? There's 2 ways to looking at it. So in nature, wood controls earth, which means if you have ever seen mudslides, like when there is mudslides or, really big mud slides, this happens when there's not a lot of trees. If you have really strong, deep-rooted trees, that is a safe place where there won't be any mudslides. It'll be very rare, right? But if there's no trees to ground, to get deep, to control the earth, then there could be the earth sliding off. Does that make sense? So wood or trees that are really deep-rooted can control earth or control earth, keep it stable. Earth controls water, and that's basically the river banks of a river that controls the river, making sure it doesn't flood, right? The banks of the river are going to control the water, so the river goes down and it doesn't flood everywhere. When it's out of balance, of course, if the earth cannot control it, then there's a flood. That happens when the river gets bigger than the bank. Make sense? Okay. And then in general, metal controls wood. So this is usually using a saw, for example, like a metal saw, and then you cut the wood. So for example, if you have, you bought a new property and it's beautiful, but there's growth of things everywhere, you're going to take your saw and you're going to control it. You're going to take down a few bushes, a few shrubs, maybe a couple of trees, so your area looks much better. You're controlling it so it doesn't get out of control and there's weeds everywhere and things that grow that you don't need. Make sense? Even though I think weeds are the best, because dandelion or pu gong yin in Chinese is one of the best herb. Weeds are so good for the liver. They're great at detoxifying. So we should not take them out to throw them out. We should take them out to use them for medicine. That's my little sidebar. And then water controls fire. Well, that's easy to know. You guys know if there's a massive fire, the only thing we can do is call the fireman. And thank you for any fireman that helps, because they put their lives on the line and they work so hard to control fire and to save lives. So that's how we go in the element, the 5 element in nature. That makes sense. It's pretty simple. Now, if we look at it from a perspective of the system within our bodies, and if it gets out of control, meaning instead of just controlling sequence, it becomes the out of control sequence. Well, out of control often is called over controlling. And I will say that the most common 5 element controlling sequence going out of whack, out of balance, and becoming over controlling or out of control is wood, over controlling earth, or liver, gallbladder, over controlling spleen and stomach. I think that's the most common one that I see in clinical practice. And if we look at emotions, for example, if someone is very stressed, very frustrated, there's a lot on their plate, suddenly they're going to feel overwhelmed, they're going to worry, they're going to overthink, which depletes the spleen, right? When stress happens as well, and people are really tense, stressed, they have a lot on their plates, their boss gave them a lot of things to do, they have their mothers is sick, there's a lot of stress that's happening, financially they're not doing well, the stress is piling up, it will affect the digestive system. And so either it will deplete the spleen and the person's going to lose their appetite and they're not going to want to eat, really poor appetite and really fatigue, that's a spleen qi deficiency, being activated due to liver qi stagnation, liver yang rising. So the liver is overpowering, over controlling the spleen, depleting it. The other side could be that if we are very stressed, what can happen is stomach heat, stomach qi rebelling. So when people are stressed, what happens? They get acid reflux, they get heartburn, they are hungry all the time, they want to eat everything, eating their feelings, their stress, right? When they eat for a few minutes, they feel a bit calmer, right? So what's really common is stress or wood, over controlling earth, and which means stress, tight liver, which depletes the spleen or project or makes the stomach react in the opposite direction. That's what I see the most in clinical practice. If you look at IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, that or irritable bowel disorder, that is would overact on earth. It is liver overacting or over controlling spleen every single time. So we need to move liver qi, reduce the stress in our treatment, and then we need to strengthen, boost, tonify the spleen at the same time. So for those people, we have to do both. It makes sense, right? Because the root cause of the fatigue or the poor appetite is the stress. We need to address both. Make sense? Please give an example in the body for controlling. That's what I'm doing. I'm coming for some more. Okay, another one that I would say I see a lot in clinical practice is fire over controlling metal. Okay, so in nature, fire means lots of heat, lots of fire. You control metal like a blacksmith controls metal by putting heat on something they're making, and they're making a knife, they're making something out of metal, and it controls with the heat, right? But if they put too much heat, the whole thing's going to crumble, and they're not going to get what they're trying to build or what they're trying to create as a blacksmith. Now, it's the same in Chinese medicine. Fire controls metal or heart, small intestine, specific heart, or the mind, the emotion, controls the lung and large intestine. However, when it's over control, The person may not sleep at all, right? They're not sleeping because maybe they're anxious, there's anxiety, there's lots of stress. We're going to talk about this in a second. But there is anxiety, so they can't sleep. And this happens for weeks and weeks and weeks, and eventually it depletes their immune system. For some people, anxiety can lead to depression, which affects the lung, right? And depletes the lung as well. So when we look at, when I said there is stress, and then there is anxiety, and then it depletes the immune system. So let's say someone comes and sees you and they're depressed and they have a low immune system, and you ask question and you trace it back to the heart because those people are very anxious and they don't sleep well. But you trace that back to the liver because the person's very stressed for months and months and months. So this is two sequences that are combined. Can you combine two sequences? Absolutely. So it started with the word or the liver generating some anxiety for the heart, and then over controlling the lung and large intestine and depleting the immune system and creating depression. So yes, you can combine. This is why the 5 element is great, because you can look at different ways and you can figure out where it all started and which ones we have to treat. So we have to treat the lung and immune system, like with stomach 36 and lung 7 to boost the immune system. But we also have to calm the anxiety and helps the sleep. So pericardium 6, heart 7, yin tongue, there's lots of points we can do to do that. And then we have to also address the fact that the liver is really tight, really tense. It's been stressed for a while. So we need to relax the liver with liver 3, gallbladder 34. Gallbladder 34 is great to relax tendons, sinews when we're tense, right? And liver 3 moves chi, allows for better flow. So this is how easy it is if you use the 5 element to make a treatment plan for the patients. We always need to figure out what systems are affected. Make sense? Okay, so I think those are the ones that I see a lot in clinical practice, mostly. I would say also that a lot of people that are fearful, that leads to anxiety, right? So water over controlling fire, that can come from a lot of fear or phobia, right? If someone has constant phobia of germs, of crowd place, of people, being around people, if there's social, fear and phobias, and they are exposed to those entities every day because they have to function in life, then it creates massive anxiety. And so if they are anxious, then that is water over controlling the heart and the fire and leads to insomnia. So you could see that we see a lot of that in clinical practice as well. So now let's talk about the third sequence in Chinese medicine 5 element theory. The third one is the insulting one. And that's interesting because I found sometimes it doesn't always jive as much for me as the first two. Specifically in nature itself, I have to think about it a little bit more, right? So when you look at the insulting sequence, it is the opposite of the controlling sequence, right? When someone tries to control you or overpower you, you can shrink down, right? And that depletes it, or you can fight back. And if you fight back, you're pushing back. And that's the insulting sequence. We're pushing right back, right? Makes sense? So when we look at the insulting sequence, if we look at what controls Earth, the insulting would be the opposite. Earth pushes back and over control or insult. And often that we have a lot of different words. So it's not always used by the word insulting, but that's the most common one. And English is not my language, so I'm trying to keep it the best I can with the English. So earth insulting word means that an earthquake, for example, can destroy the strongest trees. Even though they were rooted really deeply, an earthquake may bring all the trees down, right? So it's over insulting or insulting back. That makes sense. The most common one that we see in nature that to me makes a lot of sense is fire insulting water, right? That makes sense. That's obviously when there's a lot of fire, you could put all the water you want to try to contain and you can't contain it because the fire is so big. So that's really insulting back, drying all the water. Also, when there is a lot of sun, like in places like in deserts in Africa, everything dries up from too much heat, too much sun, right? It's overpowering and then nothing grows in the end because there's too much heat. So that makes sense, right? So that's looking at it from that perspective of the 5 elements in nature. Petra has a question that says, where does the feeling of not being safe belong to? I love that question. I need to do a live on mental health because I think that's such a great subject. So where does the feeling of not feeling safe belong to? It belongs to the 8 extraordinary vessels. And again, here's another video that I would recommend. If you haven't watched my 8 extra vessels video, watch it because I explain the 8 extra vessels are connected to our essence, our being, our DNA, our roots, because all connected to kidney, right? They carry essence. And the 8 extra vessels are connected to different aspect and time of our lives, right? So the first 7 years, the second 7 years, like when we're a teenager, the third 7 years when we go from teenager to adulthood, all this and pre-birth, it is all contained within the 8 extraordinary vessels. So the feeling of not feeling safe can come from trauma that is affecting one of the 8 extra vessels, depending when the trauma happened. And when there is trauma, it affects the essence, which means it depletes kidney in TCM perspective. So it starts from the kidney. However, remember, water generates wood. And because the kidney is being traumatically injured by an emotional trauma event that makes this person not feel safe, right? Then it doesn't generate good gallbladder. And so I would say it's kidney because it's been affected and it's within the 8 extra vessels. That's why it's never an easy answer, right? And it's not able to make a strong gallbladder. And the gallbladder, remember, is in charge of decision making and self-esteem. And when we feel not safe, usually self-esteem is quite low. We are fearful. We are fearful of being judged. Our self-esteem, self-doubt is there. And it's brought upon the fear that comes from the kidney and that could be coming from the 8 extra vessel being affected by trauma in the past. Wow, that's an explanation for you. I hope that was useful, Petra. Okay, so let's look at the insulting sequence within the body or the system of the body. Make sense? Okay, so when we look at the body itself in the insulting sequence, I think that one of the number one we see in nature, which is fire insults water and depletes all the water, is the same within the body. When there is years of anxiety, years of insomnia, it is going to age us much faster. We know that sleep is recovering time. And if we don't take the time to recover, or we can't sleep because there's a lot of anxiety and it's not addressed, we are going to age faster, which means it's going to deplete the kidney and we are going to look older, feel older as much faster than our biological age is. That's the most common one that I see in clinical practice. The second most common one that I see in clinical practice is stress. Stress is the cause of so many problems. Stress, people dismiss stress like it's no big deal. It's pretty much like affects everything. As you can see since the beginning of this lecture, it affects every system. So I always think like, let's not dismiss stress. Stress can overpower our immune system or insult our immune system coming from liver. So when liver is super stressed and tight and tense, it will insult the lung and large intestine. And that's when people will have either low immune system, it depletes the lung, depletes the immune system, the defensive qi, the wei qi, or it creates constipation and the large intestine is not able to evacuate, right? It affects either one or the other, but it affects the metal element as a whole. See? So that we see a lot in clinical practice. By the way, if you like my graphics, I'm going to show you something. If you guys haven't seen this one, this is, here we go. This is one of my book. I got 3 books, but this is where all the graphics we're using today comes from. It is the Chinese Medicine Made Easy. You can have the PDF, which has a lot of video links to complement it, I should say. And it also has my fillable intake form. So it's much easier. You can use the fillable intake form for you in your practice. Or you can look at the hard copy, which a lot of people love because we all like real books, don't we? And it has TCM foundation and diagnosis, specifically because I think everything we do in practice has to come for foundation and diagnosis. So I know a lot of you have the book already, but I just wanted to mention that because in case you don't have it, the link is below in this video. Check it out. And yeah, that's a way to support me, I guess. Okay, so let's go back to this. Petra said, makes sense. Thank you. You're very welcome. All right, so when we looked at the 5-element sequence, that was the third one. I will say that the generating sequence, the controlling and over-controlling sequence, and the insulting sequence are the one that we are taught very well in school, correct? However, I feel that the next sequence is often overlooked, not taught, and it's a shame because that's the one I was talking about at the beginning, is one of the most applicable in clinical practice. This is the 5-element cosmological sequence. To me, it's the one that makes so much sense, like so much sense. The cosmological sequence is my favorite because, like I said, it's the most applicable in clinical practice. And the way it's represented is there is 5 entities. 4 of them are going to be part of a circle that kind of is part of yin and yang. And 1 is going to be in the center of everything. So I'm going to start with the center one, which is Earth. Earth is at the center of everything. And what's interesting in Chinese medicine is Earth represents the digestive system, which is spleen and stomach. And the digestive system energy is Zhong Qi. Zhong, Z-H-O-N-G, Qi, which is the energy of the digestive system. And what does Zhong means in Chinese? It means middle. So the digestive system is in the middle. Sorry, I'll say that again. The digestive system is in the middle of our being. Because if you look at your body, the digestive system is literally halfway between the top of your head, do 20, and the bottom of your foot, kidney 1. It is literally in the middle of the body. And because it's in the middle of the body, it affects every other system. This is why I always say digestion is at the center of our health. It is key to our health. And this is the hardest thing for patients to be compliant with because you have to tell them that they have to eat better, to have a diet that is much more rich in nutrients that's going to feed the machine, feed the body. And that's always harder because people have a hard time with changing their diet. That's always been a difficulty with patients. So we have Earth at the center, which is going to affect everything else. And then we have fire and water, which are completely opposite yin and yang, right? This is easy. Fire goes up, water goes down, right? Water is cool, fire is hot. So if we look at direction, the cardinal direction, in general, we always face north, right? So when you look at a map, it's facing north. So the north is always at the top of the map and south is at the bottom of the map. However, in TCM, they look at facing south because we always face the sun. So we're going to face south. And if we face south, then the south is at the top of the map and the north is at the bottom of the map. Okay? So it's the same thing. It's just a reverse holographic map, but it's the same compass. It's just look from a different perspective. You had to pick either we face north or south. So we're facing south in TCM just because it's fun to be upside down. So fire goes up, right? And water goes down. Fire being the most young is noontime. It's the hottest time of the day, the brightest time of the day. It's summer. It's the warm part of the season, right? Compared to water, which is more yin, it is the darkest time of the night, like midnight. It's winter. It's the coldest time or coldest season, right? It's completely opposite. Make sense? So then we have the other two. We have wood and metal. So wood and metal are going to be the other cardinal direction, east and west. So wood is east, which means that's where the sun rises. So it's 6 a.m., right? We look at the clock. If you look at the clock with the 5 elements, the 4 that I mentioned that are north, south, east, and west, the time of the day is every 6 hours because there's 24 hours in a day. right? So there's every 6 hours. So we look at the wood as the sun rising, the spring, 6 a.m. This is where everything starts. This is new beginning, right? And when you look at children and kids, babies, that is liver time in our life. Liver time is when everything starts, right? We start, everything rises, right? So that's liver. Then you got metal, which is long and large intestine, and that's the opposite. This is when the sunset goes. This is when the fall appears. This is when 6 p.m. goes, right? So spring is the beginning of everything, and fall is kind of like going to the opposite direction. It's the end of everything, the end of the day, the end of a summer season. So it's the end of the yang and the beginning of the yin. That's exactly like a yin and yang wheel that continuously moves and changes every single time and every single day and seasonally, right? We did the yin yang theory last week and we talked about all this. So the fall is much more, going towards sunset. Makes sense? And then we have Earth in the center. And so Earth is part of transition. And we know that from being between seasons, the 2 weeks in season changes, like between summer and fall, but also between fall and winter. That 2 week season change, if you have patients that say, oh, I don't do well during season changes, I'm one of those, you know the spleen is depleted. And that's easy because they'll give you clues, right? Also, transitional time in life. For example, from childhood to adulthood, teenage years is Earth time. It's a transition. Or when women go through menopause and men go through melopause, when there's a transition into old age or older age, that is also Earth time. So we have to nourish the spleen and stomach and the earth element and protect it at transition time even more. And it's the same for time of day. Transition time. When is spleen time? Between 9 and 11, right? It's transition. And when is stomach time, right? Between 7 and 9. So morning time, it's transition between the sunrise and the highest time of the day. So this is really fascinating to me, but I love how Earth, or the digestive system, is at the center of everything. So let's take an example for the cosmological sequence. If someone comes in and they have issue with their digestive system, right? They're not absorbing, they're not eating well, maybe they have IBS, irritable bowel syndrome or disorder. They are having some diarrhea, constipation. It's just their digestive system is very weak, very depleted, right? It will deplete their immune system. So it will affect the immune system. It would also deplete their wood element by creating some issue, just like Mark said, like dampness. When we have a weak spleen, it creates dampness, and the dampness is going to affect the joints, the ligaments, the tendons. We may also have issue with sleeping, waking up at 1 and 3 a.m. When we have a weak digestive system, it will affect the mind. It will affect the heart, the fire element, because if we're not giving the good nutrients, we don't have enough omega-3, essential fatty acid, vitamin D, the sunshine vitamin D food, then we feel depressed or anxious. There's more and more studies showing that anxiety and the health of the gut is very much related. TCM have said that for a long time, but it's great to see that there's more and more studies showing the correlation between what TCM has been believed has happened to the body and, a study that shows, yes, it does happen, that the anxiety and the gut are completely related. And of course, if our digestive system and, the nutrients we're not getting, we're going to age much faster, right? If we eat junk food all the time, it's going to affect the kidney and the water element because we're going to get diabetes by the time, type 2. By the time we're 40, we're going to get high blood pressure. We're going to age much faster. So this is really interesting to see because that's when I explain to patients that the digestion is at the center of our health and they need to make an effort to really change the diet because otherwise the other area in their body are not going to get better. Make sense? So it's super important to really share that sequence with patients. And it's my favorite. Okay. Now, one other thing about the 5 element, we could talk about the 5 element for hours on everything, but is the charting table. right? The corresponding charting table of the 5 elements, there are many, many correspondence to the 5 elements. And in general, I like to use it in clinical practice to get clues really quickly on what element or organs are affected. For example, if we look at wood or liver gallbladder, the correspondence for season is spring, right? These tissues is tendons, ligaments, and joints. The senses is the eyes, right? The color is green. The flavor is sour. All this is going to give us some clues. And of course, the emotion is anger, irritability, frustration, impatience. So if someone comes in and they have lots of frustration and irritability, they have blurred vision and maybe spots and floaters, and they are having a sour taste in the mouth, they have joint issue, I'm like, liver, ding, 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 wood, ding, 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 right? We look at the clues, put them together and go, okay, now what it gives me is a clue that the liver is affected. So I need to ask more questions, look at more detail, be the detective that's trying to get all the clues to figure out, okay, so now liver is affected. But then liver what? Is it a liver qi stagnation, a liver fire, a liver blood deficiency, a liver yin deficiency? What is the full patterns? And that's when we start asking more questions, but it narrows it down for us. It's very easy. If people come in and they give you a few clues right away, you can see how you're going to utilize this to ask the right questions to get more deep into the diagnosis, right? So when we look at the 5 senses, for example, so it's interesting, there's 5 elements and there's 5 senses. I love that, by the way. So the tongue relates to the heart, and the eyes related to the liver, and then the mouth relates to the spleen and stomach, because that's where the digestion starts. The nose, this is where we breathe, relates to the lung, which is obviously also the large intestine and the mental. And by the way, if you've ever done Qigong, Tai Chi, yoga, deep breathing exercise, why do they always say, breathe deep, 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 deep until your stomach expands. Breathe all the way to your stomach. So that's the large intestine expanding, right? Large intestine and lung have a really good connection in breathing as well, right? We never think it that way, but that's the connection as well. And then the ears connect to the kidney and the bladder. So what's interesting about that is if someone comes in and they have tinnitus in the ear, okay, so that's one clue for kidney, bladder, right? Specifically kidney, because the yin organ have function that are a little bit more elaborate. Doesn't mean they're more important. They just have elaborate function. However, the counterpart meridian gets really to kick butt in needling practice, like the bladder meridian, which is a fantastic meridian. So kidneys, so someone has tinnitus. They come in and they have osteoporosis, so their bones are brittle. Maybe they're not old, maybe they're only like 35 years old, but they have this issue already. They're always cold, they hate winter, right? You're like, that is a lot of clues that the kidneys are being affected, in the TCM kidneys. Let's dig a little bit more to get more clues. Make sense? So that's how we're going to use this chart. I think it really helps for me specifically also with emotions, right? When people have the worry, overthinking, right away we have to think spleen, stomach, right? If someone is angry, we think liver right away. If someone is sad or grieving, if they're grieving because someone passed away, of course it's normal. We have to grieve and we have to experience all those emotions. But if they're grieving for 20 years and they're not able to process it, that becomes a problem for the lung, right? Fear obviously connects to kidneys. That also gives us clues. So there's a lot more. There's a lot more to look at when we come to the 5 elements. There's the 5 elements personalities, which I did a video recently. It's called the 5 archetypes in Chinese medicine. Check it out because I think it's very useful in clinical practice. There's the 5 body types, right? We have different body types. There's a 5 element fingers, which gives you different clues for different things. So that's also something that I like to talk about as well. So the 5 elements relate to a lot of entities and corresponds to a lot of places in the body. And it's so useful in practice. I really think that if you want more, let me see, where am I? If you want more, there's so much more on my website. I know a lot of people always ask me questions in the comments and they're like, hey, do you have this? Do you have that? Go to my website. There is a search bar on acuproacademy.com and you can search anything and you'll see that I've written a lot of blog posts. There's a lot of pictures. There's a lot of explanation. I have case studies, free PDF, free courses. Check them out and hopefully they're useful for you because I have put so much in those resources really to help students and practitioners get narrowed down and feel more confident and comfortable with learning this medicine that's amazing but so deep, right? Makes sense. So I wanted to quickly say thank you so much for all coming on this live again, because I know your time is as precious as mine. And make sure to subscribe if you haven't yet, because you don't want to miss out on all the lives and the videos that I come up with all the time. And follow me anywhere you found me. I'm literally AcuPro Academy everywhere. From Instagram to Facebook to Twitter to Pinterest to TikTok. I just repurpose everything so people can really benefit from learning about Chinese medicine. And the more you share it, the more I share it, the more we educate the world about this medicine, the better everybody will be, and it helps everyone. So the impact we have as a whole together, TCM rock stars all over the world, the better we help people in a way that is amazing, because it helps chronic disorders much better than conventional medicine. You agree?